My boyfriend planned to dump me the second my family finished paying his tuition and gave him a car, so I gave him exactly what he wanted: complete independence. I met Kyle my sophomore year of college, and we started dating a few months later. He was charming and funny and told me I was the most grounded person he'd ever met. He said he loved how stable I was. He said I was his rock. Kyle came from a rough situation. His parents cut him off after freshman year and he was about to drop out. My family has money. Not crazy money, but comfortable money. When I told my parents about Kyle's situation, they offered to help. They paid his tuition for the next 3 years. They covered his rent. They bought him a car so he could get to his internship. They treated him like he was already part of the family. Kyle always said he was so grateful. He'd tell my parents he didn't know how he'd ever repay them. He'd tell me he was the luckiest guy in the world to have found someone like me. He'd say stuff like, "I don't deserve you and I'm going to spend my whole life making this up to you." My parents loved him. My mom would cook his favorite meals when he came over. My dad would talk to him about his career plans for hours. They saw a future son-in-law. I thought I saw my future husband. For 3 years, everything seemed perfect. Kyle was doing well in school. He got good grades. He landed a great job offer for after graduation. He'd hold my hand and tell me we were going to have such an amazing life together. He said once he started working, he'd finally be able to take care of me the way I deserved. He said he couldn't wait to give back everything my family gave him. The overhearing happened 2 months before graduation. Kyle was at my apartment with his friends, and I was supposed to be at work. I came home early because I wasn't feeling well. The front door was unlocked, and I could hear them talking in the living room. I was about to walk in when I heard my name. I stopped in the hallway and listened. Kyle was telling his friends he couldn't wait to be done with me. He said I was boring. He said I had no personality. He said being with me was like dating a glass of water. His friends were laughing. One of them asked why he stayed with me so long. Kyle said, "Are you kidding? Her family paid for literally everything. I got a free ride for 3 years." He said he just had to act grateful and say the right things, and they wrote checks. He said it was the easiest thing he'd ever done. His friend asked what he was going to do after graduation. Kyle said he was going to break up with me the week after he started his new job. He said there was this girl at his internship named Tessa, who was actually exciting and fun. He said he'd been talking to her for months and she was everything I wasn't. He said he was just running out the clock with me until he didn't need my family's money anymore. He said the only hard part was pretending I was interesting. He said sometimes he wanted to fall asleep when I talked. They all laughed again. I stood there in that hallway for I don't know how long. I didn't cry. I didn't confront him. I just backed out of the apartment quietly and went to my parents' house. I told them everything. I told them exactly what Kyle said, word for word. My mom started crying. My dad didn't say anything for a long time. Then he asked me what I wanted to do. I said I wanted to stop payment on his last semester. Kyle's tuition for his final semester was due in 2 weeks. My dad had already written the check but hadn't sent it yet. I asked him not to send it. I asked him to cancel the check for Kyle's rent too. My dad made the calls that afternoon. The next day, I texted Kyle and told him we were done. I didn't explain why. I didn't give him a chance to lie his way out of it. I just said it was over and blocked his number. Kyle showed up at my parents' house that night banging on the door. He was panicking. He said he got a notice that his tuition wasn't paid. He said his landlord said the rent check bounced. He wanted to know what was going on. He wanted to know why I broke up with him. He said whatever he did, he was sorry. He said he loved me. He said I was his rock. My dad opened the door and told Kyle he knew everything. He told Kyle he heard what he said about me. He told Kyle he was the most ungrateful person he'd ever met. Kyle tried to deny it. He said it was taken out of context. He said his friends pressured him to say that stuff. He said he didn't mean any of it. My dad said it didn't matter what he meant. He said the money was gone and Kyle could figure out the rest on his own. But 3 weeks later, my company called. He'd applied for the same graduate program I was in and told HR I'd sabotaged his college funding out of jealousy. I sit in Kiana's office trying to process what she just told me. Kyle applied to my exact graduate program. He told HR I sabotaged his college funding out of jealousy. My hands are shaking. I grip the armrest of the chair to steady myself. He's trying to destroy my professional reputation the same way he destroyed 3 years of my life. Kiana is watching me carefully. She has a notepad in front of her with my name written at the top. She asks for my side of the story. I take a deep breath. The air feels thick in my lungs. I explain that Kyle and I dated for 3 years while my family paid his tuition, rent, and bought him a car. My voice sounds steadier than I expected. I tell her about the overheard conversation. The words come out mechanical. He called me boring. He said I had no personality. He said being with me was like dating a glass of water. I tell her he was just using my family's money, that he planned to dump me the week after he started his new job. Kiana writes everything down. Her pen moves quickly across the paper. I pull out my phone with trembling fingers. I show her the timeline. The exact dates my dad stopped the tuition payment and rent check after I told them what Kyle said. She leans forward to look at the screen. She takes notes carefully. Then she asks if I have any proof of what I overheard. My stomach drops. I don't have recordings. I was sick that day. I came home early. I just stood in the hallway and listened. I didn't think to record anything. I tell her no. Just my word. She nods slowly and makes another note. Kiana explains that HR has to investigate any accusation of sabotage seriously. Her tone is professional but not unkind. She says it could indicate problems with my judgment and integrity in the workplace. The words hit me like a punch. My judgment, my integrity. Kyle is questioning those things after what he did. She says I'll need to provide documentation of the financial support. She says I should be prepared for them to contact Kyle for his version of events. I nod because I don't trust my voice right now. She tells me the investigation will take a few weeks. She stands up. The meeting is over. I leave the HR office feeling sick. My legs are unsteady as I walk down the hallway. I immediately call my parents. My hands are still shaking as I dial. My mom answers on the second ring. I can barely get the words out before I start crying. I tell her that Kyle is now trying to ruin my career after everything he already did. My voice breaks. I'm standing in the stairwell because I can't make it back to my desk. My mom is asking questions, but I can't focus. My dad gets on the phone. His voice is cold with anger. It's a tone I rarely hear from him. He says he kept every receipt, every tuition payment record, every check he wrote for Kyle's rent. He'll send everything to HR today. He tells me Kyle picked the wrong family to mess with. His words are sharp and certain. I feel a tiny bit of relief cut through the panic. That evening, I sit in my apartment going through old text messages from Kyle. I'm looking for anything that might help my case. My laptop is open on the coffee table. My phone is in my hand. I scroll back through months of conversations. I find dozens of messages where he thanked my parents. Messages where he called himself lucky. Messages where he promised to pay them back someday. I screenshot every single one. My thumb moves mechanically across the screen. Each message feels like evidence of his lies. I create a folder and save them all. It takes me 2 hours to go through everything. By the time I finish, my eyes are burning from staring at the screen. Martina stops by my desk the next morning. She asks if I'm okay because I look terrible. I probably do. I didn't sleep much. I tell her what's happening. Her face goes from concerned to angry in seconds. She immediately offers to help however she can. She says everyone in the program knows I have integrity. Her words make me want to cry again, but I hold it together. She squeezes my shoulder before walking back to her desk. An hour later, my supervisor Dante calls me into his office. My heart is racing as I walk down the hall. He says HR briefed him on the situation. He's sitting behind his desk with his hands folded. He tells me that my work has been excellent. He doesn't believe the accusation, but the investigation has to run its course. He says to focus on my projects and let HR handle the rest. I thank him and leave. I spend the weekend at my parents' house helping them organize 3 years of financial records. We spread everything out on the dining room table. We find tuition receipts totaling $42,000, rent checks for another $18,000, the car purchase documentation for $15,000, $75,000 total. My mom keeps sorting papers into piles. My dad is making copies of everything. The numbers are staggering when you see them all together. My mom keeps apologizing for ever trusting Kyle. Her voice is thick with guilt. I have to remind her that he fooled all of us. That's what he was good at. She says she feels stupid for treating him like family when he was just using us the whole time. My dad puts his hand over hers. We work in silence for a while. The only sound is papers shuffling and the copy machine running. On Monday morning, I print out everything. The tuition receipts go in one folder. The rent checks go in another. The car purchase papers get their own section. I organize it all by date so the timeline is clear. Each page shows exactly when my dad sent money and exactly how much. I write a cover letter explaining what happened. I keep it simple and factual. I don't talk about my feelings or how hurt I was. I just state that Kyle and I dated for 3 years while my family provided financial support. I explain that I overheard him telling friends he was using me for money and planned to break up with me after graduation. I include the exact date I ended the relationship and the exact date my dad stopped the payments. I attach copies of text messages where Kyle thanked my parents. I attach the timeline showing he graduated on schedule so his final semester was clearly paid for. The whole packet is 40 pages. I make 3 copies, one for HR, one for my records, one for my parents. I drive to the office early before most people arrive. Kiana's assistant takes the envelope and promises to give it to her first thing. I go to my desk and try to work, but my hands won't stop shaking. 2 days pass without any word from HR. I check my email constantly. Every notification makes my stomach jump. On Wednesday afternoon, Kiana's name appears in my inbox. The subject line says, "Witness information request." She writes that they're conducting interviews with people who knew about my relationship with Kyle and my family's financial support. She asks if I can provide names and contact information for anyone who might have relevant information. I sit at my desk staring at the email. I think about who actually knew the full situation. Most of my college friends knew I was dating Kyle, but not all the details about money. Then I remember Aspen. She was in 3 classes with both of us junior year. Kyle used to complain to her about his course load, and she'd joke that at least he didn't have to worry about paying for it. She heard him talk about my family helping him dozens of times. I type her name and email address into my response. I add 2 other classmates who knew the situation, but Aspen is the main one. I hit send and immediately call her. She answers on the 3rd ring. I explain what's happening with Kyle and HR. She gets quiet for a minute. Then she says HR already contacted her this morning. She has an interview scheduled for tomorrow. She tells me not to worry because she remembers exactly how Kyle used to brag about having a girlfriend whose family paid for everything. She says she's going to tell them the truth about what kind of person he really is. That evening, my phone rings while I'm making dinner. It's Aspen calling back. She sounds angry. She says the HR interview happened an hour ago and it lasted almost 45 minutes. They asked her specific questions about Kyle's financial situation and how he talked about my family. She told them about the time Kyle showed her the car my parents bought him and said he finally didn't have to take the bus anymore. She told them about him complaining that my mom always made the same meals when really he should have been grateful for any home-cooked food. She said the HR woman took notes on everything and asked if Kyle ever expressed genuine appreciation or if it always seemed performative. Aspen said she was honest, that it always felt like Kyle was playing a role. She tells me she hopes it helps my case. I thank her about 6 times before we hang up. The next morning at work, I can't focus on anything. I have a project deadline coming up, but every time I try to concentrate, the words blur together. I keep thinking about what Kyle told HR. I keep imagining him sitting in an interview spinning some story about how I'm jealous or vindictive. Dante stops by my desk around 11. He asks if I have a minute to talk in his office. My heart starts racing as I follow him down the hall. He closes the door and tells me to sit. He says he knows I'm dealing with the HR situation, and he can see it's affecting my work. I start to apologize, but he holds up his hand. He says my well-being matters more than any project deadline. He tells me to take whatever time I need to get through this. He says if I need to work from home for a few days, that's fine. If I need to take some personal time, that's fine too. He says everyone who works with me knows I have integrity, and that's not going to change regardless of what some ex-boyfriend claims. I feel tears starting and blink them back. I thank him and promise to let him know if I need time off. He nods and I go back to my desk feeling slightly less alone. 2 weeks crawl by. I try to focus on work. I meet my project deadlines. I go through the motions of normal life. Everything feels like I'm waiting for something terrible to happen. Then on a Thursday afternoon, I get another email from Kiana asking me to come to her office the next morning at 9. I barely sleep that night. I get to the office at 8:30 and sit in the lobby outside HR for 20 minutes watching the clock. At exactly 9, Kiana opens her door and waves me in. I sit in the same chair as last time. She has a thick folder on her desk. She opens it and tells me they've completed their investigation. They interviewed multiple people and reviewed all the documentation I provided. She says the evidence strongly supports my version of events. She flips through some pages and explains that they talked to Aspen and 2 other former classmates. They also contacted my dad to verify the financial records. Everyone's statements were consistent. Kyle did receive substantial financial support from my family. Kyle did talk openly about that support with other people. The support ended immediately after our relationship ended. She looks up at me and says the timeline is very clear. Kiana turns to another section of the folder. She says Kyle's story has major problems. He claimed I sabotaged his funding before his final semester out of jealousy. But the university records show he graduated on time, which means his final semester was paid for. She says he apparently forgot that detail when he made up his accusation. She also says his story about why we broke up kept changing during his interviews. First, he said it was mutual. Then he said I was jealous of his career success. Then he said I was controlling about money. The inconsistencies made it obvious he was lying. She closes the folder and folds her hands on top of it. Then Kiana tells me something that makes my blood run cold. Kyle listed my dad as a reference on his application without asking permission. HR called my dad as part of their standard reference check. She says my dad was very clear about what kind of person Kyle is and why he stopped providing support. He told them everything about the overheard conversation and Kyle's plan to use my family, then dump me. He told them about Kyle showing up at their house begging for money after I ended things. He told them Kyle tried to manipulate and lie his way out of consequences. She says my dad's statement was one of the most damning pieces of evidence in the whole investigation. Kiana leans forward and her voice gets more serious. She says they're going to reject Kyle's application to the graduate program. The rejection is based on 2 things. First, dishonesty in the hiring process for listing an unauthorized reference and providing false information about his background. Second, making false accusations against a current employee which violates company policy. She says she's sorry I had to go through this investigation. She knows it was stressful. But she says the documentation I provided made their decision very clear. She tells me nothing about this investigation will go in my employee file since the accusation was proven completely false. She says, as far as the company is concerned, this matter is closed and my record is clean. I walk out of Kiana's office feeling like I can breathe for the first time in weeks. The weight that's been sitting on my chest since that first meeting finally lifts. But underneath the relief, there's anger. Kyle almost destroyed my career. He almost ruined my reputation at a company where I've worked hard and done good work. He tried to punish me for cutting off his free ride by making me look like a jealous saboteur. The fact that he came so close to succeeding makes me furious. I get back to my desk and just sit there for a minute, processing everything. My phone buzzes with a text from my mom asking if I've heard anything. I call her instead of texting back. I tell her it's over. I tell her HR rejected Kyle's application and cleared me of all accusations. She starts crying on the phone. Happy tears this time. She says she's so relieved. She says she was so worried about what this would do to my career. My dad gets on the phone and asks if HR told me about the reference call. I say yes. He says good because he wanted them to know exactly who they were dealing with. His voice is still hard with anger even though we won. He says Kyle deserved everything he got and more. That evening, Martina texts me asking if I want to grab dinner to celebrate. I say yes immediately because I need to talk to someone who isn't family about everything that just happened. We meet at this Italian place near my apartment, and she can tell right away that I'm wound up. She orders us wine before I even sit down and says I look like I need it. I start telling her the whole story from the beginning. How I met Kyle sophomore year. How charming he seemed. How my family paid his tuition for 3 years, plus rent, plus bought him a car. She's nodding along, but her eyes keep getting wider. I tell her about coming home early and hearing him in my apartment with his friends. I tell her exactly what he said about me being boring. About me having no personality. About dating a glass of water. Martina's face goes from shocked to angry. I tell her how he said he was just running out the clock until he didn't need my family's money anymore. How he had another girl lined up. How he sometimes wanted to fall asleep when I talked. Martina puts her fork down and just stares at me. She says she can't believe someone would be that cold and manipulative for 3 straight years. She says most people can't even fake being nice for 3 days, let alone 3 years. I tell her about cutting off his funding and breaking up with him. About him showing up at my parents' house panicking. About him applying to my graduate program and accusing me of sabotage. Martina's mouth actually drops open at that part. She says that's next level crazy. She asks if I'm okay, and I realize I actually am. The HR investigation cleared me. Kyle's application got rejected. My record is clean. I tell her I feel angry but also relieved. She raises her glass and says Kyle picked the wrong person to mess with. I call my parents when I get home from dinner. My mom answers, and I can hear the relief in her voice when I tell her everything is officially over. She says she's been worried sick for weeks. My dad gets on the phone and his voice is still hard. He says he's glad HR made the right decision, but he's not satisfied. He wants to make sure Kyle can't do this to anyone else. He asks if there's any legal action we should think about. I tell him I don't know. I say I'll look into it. He says good because people like Kyle need to face real consequences. My mom says she just wants this whole thing to be done. She says she wants me to be able to move on. My dad says moving on is fine, but letting Kyle get away with everything isn't justice. I promise them I'll research what options we have. After we hang up, I sit on my couch feeling tired. Part of me wants to just forget Kyle exists, but another part of me knows my dad is right. Kyle tried to destroy my career because I stopped giving him free money. That can't just slide. I spend Saturday morning on my laptop researching defamation law. I find out that what Kyle did might actually qualify as defamation since he made false statements to harm my professional reputation. The articles I read say you need to prove the statements were false, that they caused damage, and that the person knew they were lying. I have all of that. HR's investigation proved his accusations were false. The stress and worry over possibly losing my job counts as damage, and Kyle definitely knew he was lying. I text my dad and tell him what I found. He responds immediately with the name and number of a lawyer he knows from his business contacts. He says she handles employment law and defamation cases. He already called her this morning and she's expecting to hear from me. I stare at my phone for a minute. This feels like it's getting serious and real, but Kyle made it serious when he tried to ruin my career. I call the lawyer's number. She picks up on the second ring and says my dad already gave her the basic story. She asks if I can come to her office Monday morning to discuss the case in detail. I say yes, and she gives me the address. Monday morning, I'm sitting in the lawyer's office watching her review the timeline I put together. Her name is printed on a nameplate on her desk. She's probably in her 40s with sharp eyes that miss nothing. She reads through everything. The HR investigation summary, the documentation my parents provided, the timeline of events. She finally looks up and says we have a solid defamation case. Kyle made false statements to a third party, my employer, with the intent to harm my professional reputation. Those statements were proven false through investigation. I experienced stress and potential career damage as a result. She says any court would see this clearly, but then her expression changes. She leans back in her chair and asks what outcome I actually want. She says pursuing this will cost money and emotional energy. It could take months or even over a year. She asks if I want financial compensation or if I just want to make sure Kyle faces consequences. I sit there thinking about what she's asking. Do I want to spend the next year of my life in depositions and court hearings? Do I want Kyle to be a constant presence in my thoughts? Do I want to keep reliving what he did over and over while lawyers argue about it? The answer that comes to me is no. I don't want any of that. I tell the lawyer I don't want to spend the next year focused on Kyle and legal battles. I say I just want documentation of what happened in case he tries this with someone else. She nods like she understands. She says a lot of her clients feel that way. She suggests drafting a formal cease and desist letter instead of filing a lawsuit. The letter would detail Kyle's false accusations and threaten legal action if he contacts me, my family, or my employer again. It would create an official record without requiring months of litigation. She says if Kyle ever tries something similar in the future, this documentation would be valuable evidence of a pattern of behavior. I ask how much that would cost. She quotes me a price that's reasonable. She says she can have the letter drafted and sent within a week. I tell her to do it. She asks for Kyle's current address, and I realize I don't have it. She says that's fine. She has resources to locate him. I leave her office feeling like I made the right choice. I'm not letting Kyle off easy, but I'm also not letting him control my life. The lawyer calls me the following Monday. She says the cease and desist letter is ready and she found Kyle's address through a skip trace service. She's sending it certified mail, so we'll have proof he received it. She reads me the letter over the phone. It's formal and detailed. It lists his false accusations to my employer. It states that these accusations were investigated and proven false. It warns that any further contact with me, my family, or my employer will result in immediate legal action, including a defamation lawsuit. It says any future false statements about me will be met with the full extent of legal consequences. The letter sounds serious and official. I thank her and she says she'll let me know when Kyle signs for the delivery. I hang up and feel something settle in my chest. Kyle is going to get this letter and know that his actions have real consequences. He's going to know that I'm not just going to let him try to destroy my life without fighting back. 2 weeks pass before I get the notification. The lawyer emails me a scanned copy of the delivery confirmation. Kyle received the letter. He signed for it last Tuesday. I stare at the signature on the screen. It's definitely his handwriting. The lawyer's email says he hasn't responded or tried to contact her office. She says that's actually a good sign. It means he's taking the letter seriously. I screenshot the confirmation and send it to my parents. My dad calls me 5 minutes later. He says good. He says Kyle needed to know he can't just walk away from what he did. My mom gets on the phone and asks if I feel better now. I tell her I do. I tell her it feels like a small victory. It's not a lawsuit or a court judgment, but it's something. It's proof that I didn't just let him get away with it. After we hang up, I save the delivery confirmation in a folder on my laptop. I hope I never need it again, but I'm glad it exists. Work starts feeling normal again over the next few weeks. The investigation fades into something that happened instead of something that's happening. People stop giving me concerned looks in the hallway. Dante stops by my desk one afternoon and asks if I have a minute. We walk to his office and he closes the door. He tells me something I wasn't expecting. He says the program director was impressed by how I handled the whole situation. She thought I stayed professional and focused even while dealing with a serious accusation. Dante says it actually strengthened their confidence in me. He says they see me as someone who can handle pressure without falling apart. I don't know what to say to that. I was just trying to survive. He tells me to keep doing what I'm doing. He says good things are coming. I walk back to my desk feeling lighter than I have in weeks. Aspen texts me asking if I want to meet for coffee. We haven't talked much since she did her interview with HR. I say yes, and we meet at this place halfway between our apartments. She hugs me when she sees me and says she's so glad everything worked out. We get our drinks and sit by the window. She tells me that other people from college have been asking about Kyle. Apparently word got around about what he did. She says our former classmates are talking about it. She says his reputation is basically destroyed. People who used to hang out with him don't want anything to do with him now. She shows me her phone. Someone posted in our class group chat asking if anyone knew what happened with Kyle. The responses are brutal. People calling him a user. Saying they always knew something was off about him. Saying they feel bad for me. Aspen says she didn't realize how many people had weird experiences with Kyle until everyone started sharing stories. I ask what kind of stories. She says little things. Him always expecting other people to pay. Him talking badly about his girlfriend, me, when I wasn't around. Him acting entitled to things he didn't earn. She says people are seeing the pattern now. My mom calls me the next evening while I'm making dinner. She sounds upset. I ask what's wrong and she says she ran into Kyle's aunt at the grocery store. I freeze with my hand on the stove dial. My mom says the aunt came up to her in the produce section. The aunt apologized over and over. She said Kyle's whole family is ashamed of how he treated us. She said they had no idea what he was doing until everything came out. My mom says the aunt told her that Kyle's parents tried to talk to him about making things right. Kyle apparently told them he did nothing wrong. He said I was jealous and vindictive. He said my family turned on him for no reason. The aunt said the family doesn't believe him, but he won't admit the truth. My mom sounds tired. She says she just nodded and left. She says she doesn't want to run into any of Kyle's family again. I tell her I'm sorry she had to deal with that. She says it's not my fault. She says Kyle is the one who should be sorry, but he clearly isn't. I start seeing a therapist the following week. Her office is small and comfortable with plants on the windowsill and soft lighting that doesn't feel harsh. She asks me to tell her what brought me in, and I explain the whole situation with Kyle. The betrayal, the HR investigation, the feeling that I can't trust my own judgment anymore. She listens without interrupting, and when I finish, she asks me one question. She asks what I think Kyle's behavior says about me. I tell her it says I'm stupid, that I'm gullible, that I can't read people. She shakes her head and says those are stories I'm telling myself. She says Kyle's actions say everything about his character, and nothing about my worth. She says manipulators succeed because they're skilled at deception, not because their targets are flawed. I want to believe her, but it's hard. We schedule weekly sessions, and I commit to working through this properly instead of just pushing it down. 3 months pass, and work becomes my focus. The investigation is officially closed and filed away. People stop asking if I'm okay. Dante stops by my desk one afternoon in late spring and asks if I have time to talk. We walk to his office, and he closes the door behind us. He tells me there's a promotion opportunity within the program, a leadership position that involves more responsibility and better compensation. He says he nominated me for it. I'm surprised and ask why. He explains that the program director noticed how I handled the investigation. She was impressed by my professionalism and composure under pressure. He says they value resilience and integrity, and I demonstrated both. He tells me the application process involves interviews with senior management, but he thinks I'm a strong candidate. I leave his office feeling something I haven't felt in months. Hope. Real hope about my future here. I spend the next week preparing my application. I write about my contributions to the program and my goals for the role. I submit everything by the deadline and try not to obsess over it. 2 weeks later, I get called in for the first interview, then the second, then the third. Each one goes better than the last. I'm nervous, but I'm also confident in what I've accomplished. Finally, I get the call. They're offering me the position. I accept immediately. The new role comes with a significant pay increase and responsibilities I've been working towards since I started. It's everything Kyle probably hoped to get when he applied here. The thought makes me smile. I'm moving forward now, not just recovering. I'm building something real. Martina takes me to lunch to celebrate the promotion. We sit outside at this cafe near the office, and she orders champagne even though it's Tuesday afternoon. She raises her glass and says Kyle's scheming backfired in the most perfect way possible. She says the investigation actually made leadership notice how valuable I am. We both laugh, and I tell her I'm just grateful the truth came out before he could do any lasting damage. She says I should stop being so humble and own my success. She's right. This promotion isn't about Kyle. It's about the work I've done and the person I am. I let myself feel proud for the first time in a long time. My parents invite me over for dinner a few weeks later. I drive to their house on a Saturday evening, and my mom has made my favorite meal. We eat and talk about work and life, and everything feels normal again. Then my dad sets down his fork and says he has something to tell me. He explains that he's been thinking about the money they would have spent on Kyle's final semester. The tuition payment they stopped. He says it bothered him that the money was just sitting there when it could be helping someone who actually deserves it. So he donated it to a scholarship fund. Not just any scholarship. A fund specifically for students from difficult family situations who demonstrate genuine gratitude and character. My mom is smiling, and I feel tears starting in my eyes. It's perfect. My mom gets up and brings back a folder with all the scholarship details. She shows me the application requirements and the selection criteria. They're calling it the Integrity Scholarship. Students have to write essays about overcoming challenges and showing appreciation for help they've received. They have to provide references from people who can speak to their character. The scholarship will cover tuition and living expenses for students who prove they understand the value of support. My mom says it feels like the perfect way to turn something awful into something good. I agree completely. 3 students will receive support this year. 3 people who actually need it and will appreciate it. Over the next few weeks, I help my parents set up the application process. We create the website and write the guidelines and establish the review committee. It feels healing to focus on helping deserving students instead of dwelling on what Kyle did. My mom interviews potential committee members, and my dad handles the financial setup. I write the mission statement about recognizing character and gratitude. Working on this together brings us closer. We're taking the hurt Kyle caused and transforming it into opportunity for others. Every time I think about those future scholarship recipients, I feel lighter. They'll get the support Kyle took for granted. At work, I get assigned to mentor a new hire in the graduate program. Her name is Sarah, and she reminds me of myself 3 years ago. Eager and optimistic, and maybe a little naive about people's intentions. We meet for coffee on her first day, and I walk her through the program structure and expectations. She asks good questions and takes notes and seems genuinely excited to be here. I make a mental note to help her develop good judgment about people. Not in a cynical way, but in a realistic way. I want to teach her to trust her instincts and pay attention to actions over words. I want to help her avoid the mistakes I made with Kyle. She doesn't need to know the whole story, but she can benefit from the lessons I learned. Aspen texts me late one evening with a screenshot from social media. It shows a post from someone we went to college with. The post is about Kyle and Tessa. Apparently, their relationship lasted exactly 6 weeks before she dumped him. The timeline matches up perfectly. He must have started dating her right after we broke up. Aspen adds 3 laughing emojis and says his backup plan failed spectacularly. I stare at the screenshot for a long time. I feel a moment of satisfaction knowing that even his carefully planned alternative didn't work out. Tessa saw through him faster than I did. Maybe he showed his true colors sooner with her. Maybe she was just smarter. Either way, I'm glad she got away from him quickly. In my next therapy session, I bring up the screenshot. I tell the therapist I felt satisfied when I saw it. and then I felt guilty for feeling satisfied. She asks why I feel guilty. I explain that it seems petty to take pleasure in Kyle's failed relationship. She reminds me that it's normal to want justice after someone hurts you. She says feeling vindicated doesn't make me a bad person. Then she shifts the conversation to something harder. She asks about my anger at myself for not seeing Kyle's manipulation sooner. I admit I still feel stupid sometimes. I still wonder how I missed all the signs. She leans forward and says something that hits me hard. She says, con artists succeed because they're good at deception, not because their victims are stupid. She says Kyle spent 3 years perfecting his performance and I had no reason to doubt him until I overheard the truth. She says I need to stop blaming myself for his choices. I'm working on it. Some days are easier than others. I download a dating app a few weeks later and swipe through profiles without much pressure. I match with a guy named Eric who works in marketing and we text for a while before meeting for coffee. He's nice and easy to talk to, but I keep the conversation light and don't share too much about my personal life. We go out 3 more times over the next month, and he never pushes for more than I'm willing to give. On our 4th date, he mentions wanting to introduce me to his friends, and I realize I'm not ready for that level of commitment yet. I tell him I need to take things slower, and he says he understands, but I can see the disappointment on his face. We stop texting after that, and I feel okay about it. I go on a few more dates with different people over the next couple months, and each time I pay attention to the small things. How they treat waiters at restaurants, whether they ask about my day or just talk about themselves. If they respect my boundaries when I say I want to go home. I'm learning to trust my gut when something feels off instead of making excuses for bad behavior. The experience with Kyle taught me that actions matter more than words, and I'm not interested in anyone who can't show up consistently without expecting some kind of reward for basic decency. 6 months after the HR investigation ends, Wayne Larson stops by my desk on a Tuesday morning. He's one of the senior managers who oversees multiple departments, and I've only talked to him a handful of times at company events. He asks if I have a minute, and I save my work and turn to face him. He says he heard about the situation I dealt with earlier this year, and he was impressed by how I handled it with grace and professionalism. I feel my face get warm because I didn't realize senior leadership knew the details. He says the program director mentioned my name when they were discussing a new special project, and he wanted to talk to me about it personally. The project involves working between departments to improve communication and resource sharing across the company. He says it's high visibility work that will put me in front of executives and other senior leaders. He asks if I'd be interested, and I say yes immediately, even though my heart is racing. He smiles and says he'll send me the project details by end of day, and we can set up a meeting to discuss next steps. After he walks away, I sit at my desk trying to process what just happened. Martina rolls her chair over and asks what that was about. I tell her, and she grins and says, "This is exactly what I deserve after everything Kyle tried to do." I throw myself into the special project work over the next few weeks. The assignment requires me to meet with department heads and coordinate schedules and identify areas where teams aren't working well together. It's exactly the kind of work that needs good judgment and the ability to see the big picture. I spend hours reviewing departmental reports and interviewing team leaders about their biggest challenges. I create spreadsheets tracking resource allocation and communication gaps. I draft proposals for how to improve collaboration without adding extra meetings or bureaucracy. Wayne checks in every few days to see how I'm progressing, and he always seems satisfied with my updates. The work is challenging, but I feel confident in my ability to handle it. Every time I present findings or make recommendations, I think about how Kyle tried to question my integrity and judgment. He wanted to make me look incompetent, but instead the investigation made leadership notice my actual capabilities. I'm doing work that matters, and people are listening to my ideas. It feels good in a way that has nothing to do with proving Kyle wrong, and everything to do with proving myself right. My parents drive down to visit on a Saturday afternoon, and I give them a tour of my new apartment. I moved to a bigger place 2 months ago and spent weeks decorating it exactly how I want. The walls are painted colors I picked, and the furniture is all mine. My mom walks through each room and keeps saying how grown up everything looks. She stops in the living room and turns to me with this soft expression on her face. She says I seem different from I did a year ago, happier and more sure of myself. She says it's like I've grown into who I'm supposed to be instead of trying to fit into someone else's idea of me. My dad nods and adds that he can see the confidence in how I carry myself now. I didn't realize it was that obvious, but hearing them say it makes me realize they're right. I do feel more solid in who I am, more willing to trust my own judgment, less interested in making myself smaller to make other people comfortable. We order takeout and eat dinner on my balcony, and I tell them about the special project. My dad asks detailed questions about the work, and I can see how proud he is. Not just of my professional success, but of how I handled everything that came before it. The special project wraps up after 2 months, and Wayne asks me to present the findings to the executive team. I spend a week preparing the presentation and practicing my delivery. Dante offers to do a practice run with me and sits through 3 rehearsals giving feedback on my pacing and slide design. He tells me to slow down when I talk and make eye contact with different people around the room. He says the executives will ask tough questions and I should pause before answering instead of rushing to fill silence. The morning of the presentation, I put on my best professional outfit and review my notes one last time. I walk into the executive conference room and set up my laptop while people file in. There are 12 executives sitting around the table, and Wayne introduces me and gives background on the project. I start the presentation and my voice only shakes a little on the first slide. By the third slide, I've found my rhythm and I'm explaining the data and recommendations with confidence. The executives ask questions throughout, and I answer each one clearly and directly. When I finish the program, director thanks me and says the findings are exactly what they needed to move forward with departmental restructuring. Wayne walks me out afterward and says I did excellent work. He tells me this kind of project usually goes to people with 5 more years of experience, and I handled it better than most of them would have. The program director catches me in the hallway 3 days after the executive presentation. She asks if we can talk in her office, and I follow her, trying not to panic about what this might mean. She closes the door and tells me to sit down. She says the executive team was very impressed with my work on the special project and the presentation. She explains that they've been discussing creating a new leadership track position within the graduate program. Someone who can help shape the program's future direction and mentor incoming hires. Someone who demonstrates the kind of judgment and integrity they want the program to be known for. She looks at me and says, they want me to apply for the position. I sit there for a second, not sure I heard her correctly. She smiles and says this is exactly the kind of opportunity I was hoping for when I started this job. The role would mean a significant promotion and more responsibility, but she thinks I'm ready for it. I thank her and say I'm absolutely interested. She hands me a folder with the job description and application materials. She says the interview process will be competitive, but she's confident I'll do well. After I leave her office, I walk back to my desk in a daze. This is the kind of career advancement I dreamed about, but never thought would happen this fast. I submit my application for the leadership position and get called for the first round of interviews 2 weeks later. The process involves 3 rounds of interviews with different groups of people. The first round is with Wayne and 2 other senior managers who ask about my vision for the program and how I'd approach mentoring. The second round is with current program participants who want to know how I'd support their professional development. The third round is with the executive team who drill down on specific scenarios and decision-making frameworks. Each interview is intense and I spend hours preparing between rounds. I research leadership models and think through how I'd handle different situations. I practice answering tough questions with Dante and Martina, who take turns playing devil's advocate. The whole process takes 3 weeks, and by the end I'm exhausted, but I feel good about how I performed. I know I gave my best answers and showed them who I really am. Whether or not I get the position, I prove to myself that I can compete at this level. That I've already survived worse challenges than tough interview questions. That Kyle's attempt to destroy my reputation only made me stronger and more visible to the people who matter. 2 weeks after the final interview, I get a call from the program director. She asks if I can come to her office, and I walk down the hall with my stomach in knots. She's smiling when I walk in, and she tells me to close the door. She says the decision was unanimous, and they want to offer me the leadership position. I'll be helping shape the future of the graduate program and mentoring incoming hires and working directly with senior leadership on program strategy. The salary is significantly higher than my current role, and the responsibilities are exactly what I was hoping for. She says I earned this through the quality of my work and the integrity I demonstrated during a difficult situation. She asks if I accept, and I say yes before she can finish the sentence. She laughs and says she'll send the formal offer letter by the end of day. We shake hands and she tells me she's excited to see what I do with this opportunity. I walk back to my desk feeling like I'm floating. This is real career success that I earned through my own abilities and hard work. This is so much better than anything Kyle could have given me, even if we'd stayed together. I call my parents the second I get back to my desk, and my dad answers on the first ring. I tell him I got the leadership position, and he goes quiet for a second before saying he's so proud of me. He says I turned a terrible situation into career success, and that takes real strength and character. My mom gets on the phone, and I can hear that she's crying. She says this is so much better than anything Kyle could have given me. Better than his empty promises and fake gratitude. She says I did this on my own merit and no one can ever take that away from me. We talk for 20 minutes about the new role and what it means for my future. My dad says Kyle thought he could use my family's generosity as a stepping stone, but all he did was show everyone his true character. Meanwhile, I kept working hard and being honest, and now I'm the one moving up. My mom says she wishes Kyle could see this moment and realize what he lost. I tell her I don't care what Kyle thinks anymore. This success is mine, and it has nothing to do with him. Martina takes me out for drinks after work to celebrate the promotion. We go to a bar near the office and she orders champagne even though I say it's too expensive. She raises her glass and says she's not surprised at all that I got the position. She says I've always had the talent and integrity, and Kyle's scheming just forced leadership to notice it sooner. We talk about the new role and what it will involve, and she asks if I'm nervous about the increased responsibility. I tell her I'm excited more than nervous because I finally feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be. She says I seem lighter than I did 6 months ago. Less weighed down by what Kyle did, and more focused on what comes next. I realize she's right. I still think about the betrayal sometimes, but it doesn't define me anymore. It's just something that happened on the way to where I am now. Something that taught me to trust myself and pay attention to people's actions. something that made me stronger even though it hurt like hell at the time. Martina orders another round, and we spend the rest of the evening talking about our plans and dreams and everything we want to accomplish in our careers. The first thing I do after celebrating with Martina is sit down at my desk and write a thank you note to Kiana. I keep it professional but genuine because she handled everything fairly when she could have just believed Kyle's lies and made my life miserable. I write about how much I appreciate her thorough investigation and her commitment to protecting employees from false accusations. I drop it off at her office the next morning and she's not there, so I leave it on her desk. 2 days later, I get an email back from her that makes me tear up a little at my desk. She says my case reminded her why she does this work. She says too many people get away with making false accusations and destroying good employees' reputations. She says she's glad she could help protect someone who actually deserved protecting. I print out the email and keep it in my desk drawer because sometimes I need the reminder that not everyone is like Kyle. The first batch of thank you letters from the scholarship recipients arrives at my parents' house 3 weeks after the awards were announced. My mom calls me immediately and asks if I can come over to read them together. I drive over after work, and we sit at the kitchen table with all the letters spread out in front of us. There are 3 students this year, and each one wrote multiple pages about what the scholarship means to them. The first student is a girl named Maria, who's studying engineering and working 2 part-time jobs to support herself. She writes about how the scholarship will let her cut back on work hours, so she can focus on her hardest classes. She says she's so grateful that someone believes in her potential and wants to help her succeed. The second student is a guy named James who lost his parents in a car accident and is being raised by his grandmother. He writes about how he was going to have to drop out because his grandmother can't afford tuition on her fixed income. He says the scholarship saved his college career, and he promises to work hard and make us proud. The third student is a girl named Smith who came to the country as a refugee when she was 12. She writes about how education is everything to her family and how grateful they are for this opportunity. She says she wants to become a teacher so she can help other refugee students succeed. My mom is crying by the time we finish reading all the letters. These students are genuinely grateful and working hard and honest about their situations. They're everything Kyle pretended to be, but never was. My mom says this is what generosity should look like. People who actually need help and appreciate it instead of people who manipulate and use others. I help her write response letters to each student wishing them luck and telling them we're proud to support their education. I run into Ryder Curtis completely by accident at a coffee shop near campus 2 weeks later. I'm waiting for my order when I hear someone say my name. I turn around and there he is, looking uncomfortable and guilty. He was one of Kyle's friends who was there that day in my apartment when I overheard everything. He asks if we can talk for a minute, and I almost say no, but something makes me stay. We sit down at a table in the corner, and he immediately starts apologizing. He says he's been wanting to reach out for months, but didn't know how. He says he feels terrible about not speaking up when Kyle was trashing me that day. He says he should have told Kyle to shut up, or at least defended me somehow. He says he didn't realize how serious the situation was, or that Kyle was actually using my family for money. He thought Kyle was just complaining about his girlfriend the way guys sometimes do. I listen to him talk, and I can tell he genuinely feels bad, but I also don't really care anymore. I tell Ryder I appreciate the apology, but I'm not interested in going back through everything that happened. I tell him I'm focused on my future now, and Kyle is completely irrelevant to my life. I tell him what Kyle did, says everything about Kyle's character and nothing about mine. Ryder nods and says he gets it. He says Kyle burned a lot of bridges after everything came out and most of their friend group doesn't talk to him anymore. He says people realized Kyle was willing to use anyone for whatever he could get. I tell Ryder I hope he learned something from watching Kyle's behavior, and then I grab my coffee and leave. I don't need his apology or his guilt. I just need to keep moving forward. My new leadership role comes with responsibilities I actually care about. One of the first projects I work on is developing better screening processes for graduate program applicants. We sit in a conference room for 3 days going through the current application system and identifying weak spots. I suggest we implement character reference checks that go beyond just professional recommendations. I want us to look for patterns of integrity and genuine gratitude instead of just credentials and test scores. I want us to catch people like Kyle before they get in and hurt the program's culture. Dante loves the idea, and so does the program director. We create a new section in the application where candidates have to provide references from people they've helped or worked with in difficult situations. We add interview questions about times they faced ethical dilemmas. We develop a scoring system that weighs character as heavily as qualifications. It takes weeks to build the whole system. But when we're done, I feel like we've actually created something that will protect future employees from going through what I went through. 3 months after we implement the new screening process, Dante stops by my desk with a satisfied look on his face. He tells me my suggestions have already helped them identify and reject 2 applicants with concerning histories. The first applicant had glowing credentials, but 3 of his character references gave vague answers and seemed uncomfortable talking about him. When HR dug deeper, they found complaints from previous coworkers about him taking credit for other people's work. The second applicant made it through the first round but failed the ethics interview badly. She couldn't give a single example of helping someone without expecting something in return. Dante says both applicants would have been accepted under the old system because their resumes looked perfect. But the new system caught the red flags that credentials can't show. I feel good knowing I'm helping protect the program's culture and preventing other people from getting hurt by manipulators. Dante says the program director wants to present our new screening system at the national conference next year as a model for other companies. He asks if I want to be part of the presentation team, and I say yes immediately. My therapy sessions have been going well enough that my therapist says we can start spacing them out. Instead of every week, we're going to meet every other week and eventually once a month. She says I've made progress in processing the betrayal and rebuilding my sense of trust in myself and others. She says I came in angry and hurt and confused about how I missed the signs with Kyle. Now I understand that manipulators are good at hiding their true intentions, and that doesn't mean I'm stupid or naive. She says I've done the work to separate Kyle's actions from my self-worth. His betrayal was about his character flaws, not about me being boring or uninteresting or unworthy. She says I'm ready to start applying what I've learned to my daily life without needing weekly check-ins. I feel proud of the progress, but also a little nervous about having less support. She reminds me I can always schedule extra sessions if I need them, and that spacing out appointments is a sign of health, not abandonment. I meet someone new at a work conference in another city 2 months later. The conference is about leadership development in corporate graduate programs, and I'm there representing my company's new screening process. I'm sitting in a breakout session about mentorship when the guy next to me makes a quiet joke about the presenter's overly complicated slide deck. I laugh before I can stop myself, and he grins. His name is Noah, and he works for a tech company in a different state. We end up sitting together for the rest of the session and then getting coffee afterward. He actually listens when I talk about my work instead of just waiting for his turn to speak. He asks follow-up questions that show he's paying attention. He tells me about his job and his life, and nothing he says sounds like a performance. We exchange numbers before going to our separate sessions, and I feel cautiously optimistic about getting to know him. I'm not ready to jump into anything serious, but I like that he makes me laugh and treats me like an actual person. Noah and I start texting after the conference and then talking on the phone a few times a week. The relationship develops slowly, which feels right after everything with Kyle. Noah lives 3 hours away, so we can't see each other constantly, and that's actually good. We have time to get to know each other without rushing into anything. He's respectful of my boundaries and doesn't push when I say I want to take things slow. When I finally tell him about Kyle and what happened, he listens without judgment. He doesn't try to fix it or tell me what I should have done differently. He just says that sounds really hard and he's glad I got out when I did. We have our first real date 2 months after the conference when he drives to my city for the weekend. We go to dinner and a museum and walk around downtown talking about everything. He doesn't try to kiss me at the end of the night, which I appreciate. He texts me when he gets home saying he had a great time and wants to see me again soon. I realize I'm with someone who values me for who I actually am, instead of what I can give him. I invite Noah to meet my parents 4 months into dating. I'm nervous because my parents loved Kyle and I don't want them to compare or bring up the past. But my dad pulls me aside before Noah arrives and tells me they're not going to mention Kyle unless I want to talk about him. Noah shows up with flowers for my mom and a bottle of wine for dinner. He's polite and genuine and doesn't try too hard to impress them. He asks my dad about his work and listens to my mom's stories about their recent vacation. After Noah leaves, my dad tells me he can see the difference in how this person treats me. He says, with Kyle, I always seemed like I was trying to prove I was interesting enough or worthy enough. With Noah, I seem relaxed and happy just being myself. My mom agrees and says she can tell Noah actually enjoys my company instead of tolerating it. They both say they like him and want me to bring him around more often. I feel relieved and grateful that they can see what I see in him. A year passes, and I'm sitting in my new office reviewing quarterly reports for the Leadership Development Program. The HR investigation feels like something that happens to a different person in a different life. I still think about Kyle sometimes when I'm training new hires or reviewing applications, but mostly I feel grateful. Grateful the truth came out before I wasted more years. Grateful I learned what real manipulation looks like. Grateful I'm surrounded by people who value me for who I actually am instead of what I can provide. My relationship with Noah is steady and comfortable in ways my relationship with Kyle never was. We celebrated our 1-year anniversary last month with a weekend trip, and nobody had to prove anything or perform gratitude. My parents like him, and more importantly, they see how relaxed I am around him. My mom says I laugh more now than I did in all 3 years with Kyle. The interview panel meets every other week to review graduate program candidates, and I've gotten good at spotting red flags in applications. I ask questions about character references that go deeper than the standard verification. I look for patterns in how people talk about past relationships and previous support systems. My experience taught me to trust my instincts when something feels off about someone's story. Last month, we caught an applicant who inflated his credentials and blamed his college advisor when we asked for verification. Dante said my questions uncovered what everyone else missed. The screening process I helped develop has already prevented 2 potentially problematic hires from entering the program. I feel good knowing my worst experience is helping protect the company culture and future employees. My parents stop by for dinner one evening, and my mom brings photos of the scholarship recipients. 9 students have received support from the Integrity Scholarship Fund so far, and all of them are thriving in their programs. They send thank you letters and progress reports that my parents keep in a special folder. My mom shows me a letter from a student who says the scholarship saved her from dropping out, and now she's on track to graduate with honors. She tells me this is the best thing to come out of everything that happened with Kyle. Turning something awful into something that helps deserving students feels like the right kind of justice. My dad says they're planning to expand the fund next year to support even more students. I help them review applications sometimes, and it's healing to see genuine gratitude from people who actually appreciate the opportunity. Martina stops by my desk Tuesday afternoon asking about lunch plans, and I realize I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Life is busy with program development projects and candidate interviews and relationship stuff with Noah. It's challenging in good ways that push me to grow instead of diminishing me. The people around me value my judgment and contributions instead of tolerating my presence while waiting for something better. I close my laptop and grab my bag to meet Martina downstairs. She's telling me about a new restaurant downtown as we walk to the elevator, and I'm listening because I actually want to hear what she has to say. This is what real friendship looks like. This is what being valued feels like. Kyle's betrayal taught me the difference between people who use you and people who choose you. I choose to be here surrounded by people who see me as more than a resource to exploit.